Nobody wanted to face Mike Tyson in his prime. In the late 1980s, heavyweight boxing entered a nightmare few fighters were willing to face. His name was Mike Tyson, a 220-pound storm of speed, rage, and raw destruction. Opponents didn't just lose to Tyson. Many were defeated before the opening bell ever rang. Some refused the fight, others lasted seconds, and a few later admitted the truth. They were terrified, and trained in the shadows by Cus D'Amato and unleashed on the world stage as a teenage wrecking machine. Tyson didn't just knock men out, he erased their confidence, their game plans, and sometimes their careers. Champions avoided him. Contenders prayed to survive him. Promoters struggled to find anyone willing to step into the ring. Because in his prime, Mike Tyson wasn't just a champion. He was the fight nobody wanted. Long before the belts, the knockouts, and the global fame, the fear of Mike Tyson was already spreading through boxing gyms across America. As a troubled teenager from Brooklyn, Tyson arrived at Cus D'Amato's camp carrying rage, abandonment, and a desperate hunger to dominate. Cus didn't just train him, he rebuilt him. He molded Tyson into a compact, explosive heavyweight designed for one purpose: controlled destruction. By the time Tyson entered the amateur scene, whispers had already begun. Sparring partners talked about his unnatural power. The coaches noticed the speed, terrifyingly fast for a heavyweight. And opponents quickly realized this wasn't a normal prospect. Tyson didn't box to win rounds. He hunted to end fights. Under Cus's peekaboo system, Tyson slipped punches like a middleweight and fired hooks with frightening torque. Young fighters who faced him often lasted only moments before being overwhelmed. Some froze under the pressure. Others simply shelled up, trying to survive. Then came 1985. Tyson turned professional at just 18. What followed wasn't a career start. It was a warning to the entire division. Knockouts stacked up in brutal fashion, each one louder than the last. And with every collapse of an opponent, one truth became clearer. Boxing wasn't witnessing the rise of a champion. It was witnessing the birth of fear. By 1985, Mike Tyson was no longer just a frightening prospect. He had become a full-scale demolition machine tearing through the heavyweight division. Fighting at a relentless pace, sometimes every few weeks, Tyson built a knockout streak so violent and so consistent that opponents barely had time to prepare or recover. One by one, seasoned professionals entered the ring with experience, size, and confidence, and left in ruins. What made Tyson different wasn't only power. Heavyweights had always punched hard. But Tyson combined explosive speed, head movement, and ruthless finishing instinct in a way the division had never seen. He slipped inside jabs, detonated hooks to the body, and finished with savage uppercuts that snapped heads back like whiplash. Fights didn't unfold, they collapsed. By November 1986, at just 20 years old, Tyson captured the heavyweight title, becoming the youngest champion in history. The image of Trevor Berbick stumbling helplessly across the canvas, legs refusing to obey his brain, became symbolic of the era. This wasn't simply defeat. It looked like physical shutdown under overwhelming force. From that moment on, something changed in the division's psychology. Contenders didn't talk about beating Tyson, they talked about surviving him. Managers studied rankings nervously. Promoters struggled to sell hope against inevitability, because during this phase, Tyson didn't feel like a champion climbing the mountain. He felt like an unstoppable force already at the peak, and everyone else was simply waiting their turn to fall. As Mike Tyson's knockouts piled up and the heavyweight title wrapped around his waist, a quiet but powerful shift began inside boxing's inner circles. The fear wasn't just among journeymen anymore. It reached champions, contenders, and the powerful managers who controlled their careers. Because facing Tyson in the late 1980s didn't look like a competitive opportunity. It looked like a calculated risk of destruction. Several top heavyweights of the era circled around the title picture without rushing toward Tyson. Mandatory challenges stretched into negotiations. Unification talks stalled. Rankings maneuvered. Promoters spoke about timing and business sense, but insiders understood the truth. Stepping in with Tyson meant shortened careers, damaged reputations, and possibly permanent physical harm. The visual evidence was impossible to ignore. Trained professionals collapsing in seconds under compact, violent combinations. Even elite champions felt the pressure. Fighters who had confidently dominated the division before Tyson suddenly adopted cautious tones when his name appeared. Interviews became diplomatic, respectful, non-committal. Because publicly calling out Tyson meant eventually sharing the ring with him, and very few truly wanted that reality. Managers were even more protective. In heavyweight boxing, one brutal loss can erase years of market value. And Tyson wasn't just beating opponents. He was dismantling them in ways that left psychological scars. A fighter knocked out in routine fashion could rebuild. A fighter obliterated by Tyson carried the footage forever. This avoidance didn't always appear as blatant refusal. It surfaced through delays, alternative matchups, or strategic patience, waiting for Tyson to age, slip, or change. The division wasn't frozen by politics, it was frozen by intimidation. Because in that era, facing Mike Tyson wasn't viewed as a championship challenge. It was viewed as stepping voluntarily into a storm most believed they could not survive. To understand why so many fighters feared Mike Tyson, you have to step inside the ring with him, or at least imagine it. The bell rings, and before a jab can even establish distance, Tyson is already in range. Head moving, shoulders rolling, eyes locked forward. There is no feeling out round, no slow build, only immediate pressure. Opponents often described the same sensation. The space disappears, and panic begins. Tyson's peekaboo style turned defense into attack. He slipped punches by inches, closing distance with explosive footwork, and then unleashed short, concussive hooks from angles heavyweights weren't built to read. Body shots folded ribs, uppercuts rose from blind spots. And once an opponent showed the slightest sign of hurt, Tyson accelerated, combinations arriving in violent bursts that overwhelmed both guard and instinct. What made it terrifying wasn't just impact. It was inevitability. Fighters realized quickly that their usual tools, jab, clinch, movement, were being erased. Tyson cut the ring with predatory precision, trapping opponents near the ropes where escape vanished. From there, the storm began. Many knockouts didn't come from single punches, but from psychological collapse under sustained assault. You can see it in the footage. Widening eyes, stiff legs, delayed reactions. Skilled professionals reduced to survival mode within seconds. Some stopped punching back entirely. Others turned away, overwhelmed. The crowd saw knockouts. Opponents felt something closer to controlled chaos. Because inside the ring with Prime Tyson, fighters weren't simply losing exchanges. They were experiencing the sensation of being hunted and caught. By the late 1980s, Mike Tyson's aura had grown so massive that it blurred the line between dominance and myth. To fans and media, he appeared invincible, a once-in-a-generation destroyer who ended fights before they began. And for a time, the results supported it. Knockouts were fast, violent and absolute. Opponents looked helpless. The legend fed itself. But inside boxing's technical circles, a quieter question existed. Was Tyson truly unbeatable, or had fear amplified his dominance? Experts began noting subtle truths beneath the devastation. Tyson's style thrived on forward momentum and psychological control. When opponents froze, he overwhelmed them. When they retreated, he cut them off. But very few had yet tested him under sustained resistance, clinch-heavy tactics, or late-round endurance battles. His fights rarely extended long enough to examine deeper layers of his game. The intimidation itself became a weapon. Fighters entered already doubting survival, not victory. That mental shift alone altered reactions, timing, and risk-taking. A heavyweight hesitating by half a second against Tyson wasn't just cautious. He was finished. The myth didn't just describe Tyson. It actively strengthened him. And yet, hints of humanity existed. Occasional clinches, moments of reset, signs that beneath the storm was still a young champion whose dominance depended on control of pace and fear. But almost no one pushed long enough to expose it. So, the reality settled somewhere complex. Tyson was not a myth created by fear, but fear made the myth far larger than any opponent could challenge. Decades have passed since Mike Tyson's prime, yet one truth remains unchanged in boxing memory. There has never been another heavyweight quite like him. While many champions dominated, some ruled longer, others achieved greater records. But Tyson's peak created something rarer than statistics. It created universal reluctance. In his era, fighters didn't measure themselves against him. They measured distance from him. Today's heavyweights are bigger, more technical, and more carefully managed. Careers are protected. Risks calculated. But in the late 1980s, the division revolved around a single terrifying center. Tyson didn't just hold the belts, he held the psychological gravity of the sport. The question wasn't who would beat him, it was who would dare. Footage still shows it clearly. The walk to the ring, the black trunks, the expressionless stare. Opponents already diminished before contact. That aura, raw, immediate, predatory, has never been fully replicated. Even now, fighters speak of Tyson's prime with a tone reserved for natural disasters. Respect mixed with disbelief. Because in boxing history, champions come and go. Legends rise and fall. But Mike Tyson's prime remains a moment when the heavyweight division shared a single fear. He was the fight nobody wanted.